Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. It is the deadliest one-man massacre in American history, yet already among the most forgotten. It's been just a month since Stephen Paddock killed 58 people in Las Vegas. For weeks, we've been asking basic questions about what happened, most of which remain unanswered tonight. What was Paddock's motive for the shooting? How did authorities possibly allow his house to be burgled? Why was Paddock's computer hard drive missing, and why did it take so long for us to learn it was missing? Why did security guard Jesus Campos travel to Mexico just days after the shooting, despite being a key witness? And why did authorities refuse to talk about that? Why have Campos's subsequent appearances been so closely managed by his employer, MGM? And more than anything, what's the actual timeline of this shooting? What happened and when did it happen? And why in the world is it still so hard to get a straight answer about that? Well, to these long-standing questions, we can add a few more tonight. Why did we only learn today from the Clark County Sheriff that Paddock's girlfriend could be withholding important information in this case? If in fact she knows more than she's saying, why isn't she being interviewed right now? We also discovered today that a police officer accidentally fired his gun in Paddock's hotel suite on the night of the shooting. How did that happen? Guns don't often accidentally discharge, they're accidentally fired. What exactly were the circumstances of this firing? Now, we're not trying to push a wild conspiracy theory here. It's possible the Trilateral Commission was involved, but the more likely and, in fact, far more terrifying explanation is incompetence. The people running this case don't really know what they're doing. You hate to conclude something like that, but it's becoming hard not to, especially when you consider the Las Vegas case in its larger context. This is not the only federal investigation that has shaken public confidence recently. Consider some of the others. The FBI had Omar Mateen under surveillance for 10 months, and yet somehow didn't hinder his planning or execution of the Pulse nightclub massacre. The FBI was also apparently aware of New York City killer Sayfullo Saipov, Fort Hood shooter Nidal Hassan, Boston bomber Tamerlan Tsarnaev, and a list of other killers, but failed to stop any of their attacks. How come? The FBI famously investigated Hillary Clinton's email server for more than a year, during which time, for some reason, the Bureau gave immunity to several top aides for no obvious reason and failed to tape record key interviews. Why is that? Speaking of emails, the FBI never examined the DNC's email server after it was supposedly hacked. Instead, they just accepted the claim of a private contractor employed by the Democratic Party that the hacking was the work of the Russian government. Why didn't one of the Bureau's many tech teams conduct its own investigation of a matter this important and politically sensitive? Meanwhile, in case after case, the FBI's supposedly incorruptible white-collar division has leaked sensitive details of current investigations to the press. How does behavior like that restore public confidence in federal law enforcement? It doesn't, of course, and it shouldn't. We have a right to be worried about the FBI. There is no more powerful federal agency in this country. They can read your email, they can root through your bank records, they can break down the front door of your house and arrest you in front of your children. Lying to them is a federal crime. We need to be absolutely certain the FBI is worthy of the power we give them. What is happening in Las Vegas right now is one of many reasons to wonder if they are. Craig Island is a lawyer representing several of the victims of the Vegas attack, and he joins us tonight. Craig, thanks for coming on. You're, I think, one of the few people who's been to the scene of the crime.
Yes, sir.
And did anything useful come out of that? Did you learn anything?
We learned several things. Number one, we do know that the FBI has taken all of the bullet marks and all of the bullet holes and assumed all the bullets. The other thing that was interesting is that all of our clients were telling us that on the night of the shooting that there was nowhere to go. Now, come on, we can see that there's exits in the plans and the maps. And then when you're actually there, you can see that most of the exits were blocked. Many of the exits were behind fences, and there was only really 2 places in which to escape. And that's very concerning, especially when people got hit and killed 10 minutes after the shooting started.
Is there any indication, or have you seen any evidence that the FBI had knowledge of Stephen Paddock, anything about Stephen Paddock before this happened?
Well, not yet, because we don't have anything released from the FBI or other law enforcement agencies about him, really.
Why is that?
I don't know. I do think that after 30 days, we ought to be having more information than we have right now. For example, we know bits and pieces we know that he arrived with 10 bags. We know that 2 bellmen helped him carry those bags up. Then we find out that those 10 bags had guns in them, 5,000 rounds of ammunition. We know that MGM claims to have a if you see something, say something policy. And you're telling us that nobody saw those guns over a 5-day period? No maid, no housekeeping, no food service ever saw any of the guns? Nobody saw him using power drills in the hallway. Nobody saw him setting up security cameras. These are all things that need to be answered. I know you've asked the same questions, and so are we.
Some of them, I hadn't even asked some of those questions. How did he get access to the service elevator if, in fact, he used it? Do you know?
We don't know. We've heard 2 separate things. One, that he asked to use it, so they let him. And 2, that since he was a VIP and part of the M-Life program, that he was allowed to have access to the service elevator. Either one, or either way, it's concerning. But more concerning is, how does a bellman haul up 10 bags with heavy, long rifles in them, 5,000 rounds of ammunition? They have this corporate watch center where they allegedly teach their people, if you see something, say something, and nobody says anything? And if they did, what happened with that information? I think that 27 high-powered rifles ought to pique somebody's interest, and that's the questions that we want answered.
Have you been able to speak to Jesus Campos?
No. Neither have you.
No. And it's our impression, just from watching, that MGM has kept pretty tight management of the things that he says in public. Why would you think that would be the case?
Maybe they're concerned of what he's going to say. Maybe they're concerned he's not going to stick with the MGM story. But eventually, he will be examined under oath by attorneys in these cases. And so it's going to be important to know the timeline from what he says and from what the other 2. Now we know that there was 2 other police officers on the floor with him prior to the shooting. Those are all questions that have to be answered, and they eventually will. Unfortunately,
except I'm sorry. What is police officers or MGM security guards?
As of yesterday, it was that 2. We knew about Campos, but that there was 2 other police officers from the MGM that were on the floor prior to the shooting, but that's part of the ever-changing timeline.
So, but just to be clear, not Las Vegas Police Department, but MGM employees acting as security.
No, there was a report yesterday that there were 2 off-duty officers on the floor that responded to Campos prior to the shooting beginning.
Huh. This is getting more confusing by the day. Craig, thank you for this. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Dan Bongino was a former NYPD officer and a Secret Service agent. Kelly McCann, a former Marine Special Missions officer and CEO of Combatives Brand Security Consultants and Training, both join us. Kelly, first to you. You've seen a lot of shootings in your long and varied life. What jumps out at you as you look at the facts around this one?
How many years has it been since Oswald supposedly shot Kennedy? We got that figured out?
Good point.
Okay, so I mean, anytime bullets start flying, anytime the fog of war and all that stuff figures in, it's going to be confusing. But there are some things that jump out, and the conspiracy theorists are already doing their work, you know, and wondering why. One of the first things that jumps out at me is Paddock pulled up these weapons. So you just heard the attorney say, how did he get them up there? How many times do golf clubs go inside that hotel? And those paid employees that are there are at the bottom of the pay scale. Do you really think they're risking their job to bring suspicion against what was supposedly a whale, a guy that's making a lot of money? So there's a human element here that has to be accounted for also, right? It's just not black and white. I mean, could the guy have made repeated runs upstairs with one of those bell carts with something that looked like a golf bag? Of course. You know, so what seems should be very obvious sometimes isn't. Another thing is there's been a lot of talk about the security cameras, that the security cameras on his floor weren't present. Were they not present because they were never installed, or were they removed? And why were they removed? He couldn't have removed them, because if obviously security personnel saw him in the face doing it, that would have been an issue, right? So that's an issue, okay? I would think that they probably were never installed or were going to be repaired.
Dan Bongino, is it since you've worked for both the NYPD and a federal agency, the Secret Service, is it obvious to you watching who's in charge of this investigation, and why isn't there a central narrative coming out? Why isn't one person speaking for the whole investigation?
Well, Tucker, based on who's controlling the evidence right now, the FBI, it seems to me to be pretty clear that the Bureau is directing this. But, you know, I liked how you opened with this, and I think you made a really salient point that deserves repeating here. We're at a time in American history where confidence in our federal law enforcement, whether it's the collection of metadata, the failure of the Clinton investigation, the politicizing of our FBI, this is not the time to keep a lid on one of the largest mass murders in American history. If you have information, gosh, you've got to get it out there, Tucker. I mean, how is it at this point? Think about it. We had this absolutely horrifying tragedy up in New York. We've already got the motive, we've got the suspect, and we've got a general idea from 30,000 feet about what happened. How is it in this case we still have no idea about what the motive is, or if they do, they at least haven't told the American people to put them at ease? Remember, we were the victims in this, the American people. It's the right thing to do.
I agree completely. Kelly, we learned today that a firearm was discharged accidentally somehow in the hotel room. I think the police described it as an accidental discharge. Do firearms accidentally discharge typically?
I mean, the term for firearms trainers is always negligent discharge. Now, you got to put it in perspective, right? It takes big stones to go into a room where you know someone's been firing a high-powered rifle.
Yeah.
Right? It was a very hurried thing. The normal active shooter response now is to go immediately to the crisis point. There was an explosive breach when they went in. I don't even know that had to be in place. That figures into the timeline, how much time was in there. But it might have happened on a reholstering. Certainly there wasn't any furtive motion in the room that the officer could have alerted on. But people make mistakes. You know, it's easy to be critical after one of these things.
For sure. And I think this gets the whole question of, you know, why wouldn't you have conspiracy theories around an investigation where there's no clear source of information?
There's no list.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much. Not the only attack we're looking at tonight, though. Of course, police are still probing the deadly attack Tuesday night afternoon in Manhattan, where Sayfullo Saipov murdered 8 people while yelling Allahu Akbar. Fox correspondent Geraldo Rivera joins us with the latest on that. Geraldo, good to see you. What do we know?
You know, Tucker, if I may comment just briefly on Vegas, I think that if you're 2 big lawsuits were filed last night by a consortium led by the LA Times. They're all suing for body cam, search warrant, all the evidence logs. They are really as impatient as you have been leading this charge to find out what happened. If I may, just very briefly, I think that the person or the entity with the biggest motive to fudge with the timeline would be MGM, would be the Mandalay Bay. Why?
I agree.
If indeed 6 minutes passed between Campos being shot and then Pollock opening fire on the crowd, that's an intolerable length of time before the 911 was issued, was called. If the smaller that time, the less the negligent liability of the hotel would be. In other words, if Pollock shot Campos and then opened fire on the crowd, very little negligence to the MGM, or it would be more difficult to prove. If the time is 6 minutes, my God, how could they not call for 6 minutes? So MGM has a motive to shorten that timeline. In terms of the
well, let me just pause and just note that lawyers should not be in control of any of the information coming out of a case like this. I mean, it's appalling that lawyers have as much influence as they do, I would say.
They do, and believe me, Mandalay Bay, MGM, they have the best lawyers in the country on this, and their job is to minimize the tort liability, the civil liability, in the hundreds of millions of dollars. When you think 58 dead people, scores injured, every one of them has either a wrongful death or an infliction of emotional or physical wounds. It's an enormous liability if they are found indeed the Mandalay Bay to be negligent. In terms of of New York and what happened with the mowing down of these poor people, 8 people, 5 of them from Argentina. The big question is why didn't we have a red flag about this guy in the Omar Mosque in Paterson, New Jersey? My first assignment when I came to work at Fox News was to go to New Jersey in the wake of 9/11, go to the mosques, including those in Paterson, and find out why the response of the Muslim community was as muted as it was. Why weren't they as outraged outraged as the rest, allegedly, why weren't they as outraged as the rest of the American community? That was my very first assignment 16 years ago, and we're back there again. Why didn't we know what this guy was planning?
Right.
What about his family? He lived right next door to the Omar Mosque in Patterson. Why don't we know more about the build-up to this? Is it conceivable that people didn't know or should not have known what he was planning? But this guy is toast. He's not going to Guantanamo Bay. He's going to be tried. He's going to be convicted in the Southern District of New York in Lower Manhattan, just a mile away from his hideous crimes, and he's going to get the death penalty, Tucker.
That's the prediction. Geraldo Rivera, thanks a lot for that.
Okay, buddy.
Republicans dropped their tax plan today. You'll notice we didn't lead with it. There's a reason for that. It's unclear exactly what some of it means. There's a ton of propaganda out there about the tax plan, but it's too important a story to jump in without having all the facts. So we're going to California this weekend. We're going to be talking to the Treasury Secretary himself, Steve Mnuchin, and we're going to bring you what we find. We will get to the bottom of it if we can. Ed Henry, meanwhile, will be here in a sec to tell us what exactly we know and what it might mean for you. Also, a key Democratic talking point on Uranium One just fell apart completely. We'll tell you what happened. Coming up.
Here's the story of Green Mountain Coffee Roasters Sumatra Reserve.
For years, you've heard the Uranium One deal be defended on the grounds that even if it gave Russia control over a huge swath of U.S. uranium deposits, no big deal, it still didn't allow that uranium to be exported from this country. Democrats insisted on that repeatedly, including many times on this show.
Uranium does not leave the United States without getting a export license from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
False. They have no export license. That's the whole point.
Now, with respect to the export of uranium, I haven't heard anyone say that it made it to anywhere improper.
Russia can't export this uranium outside of the United States. It's not like they can do just whatever they want with it.
Actually, they can, and they did. New reporting by The Hill today reveals what we've been saying for a while, that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission under the Obama administration approved the export of uranium, with some of it traveling from this country to Canada to Europe, and from there, your guess is as good as ours. Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney represents New York, and he joins us tonight. Congressman, if you're concerned about Russian interference in the business of the United States, and you think that they are a rival, maybe even an enemy with which we're at war, as some of your colleagues have said, you've got to be pretty concerned that a Russian company has exported American uranium without a license outside our borders and off this continent.
Right. I know there's a report about that. We should look into it.
No, it's actually been looked into and confirmed by the New York Times a couple of years ago, and today again by The Hill. No one involved denies it.
Right. We should look into it.
Well, here's what we know. We know that in 2012, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, I'm quoting now, authorized an amendment to an export license for a Paducah, Kentucky-based trucking firm that moved this yellow cake uranium, which can be used for a bunch of different purposes, good and bad, to leave the country. Are you concerned about that?
Of course I'm concerned about it, and we should look into it. I don't know.
If I look into it, why wouldn't you have maybe a criminal probe into this? Why would you allow our main geopolitical rival to move uranium off the continent?
Right. Well, I don't think that's what the Hill story said, but I'm agreeing with you that we should look into it.
Oh, no, actually, that's exactly what it said.
Well, no, I think it said that some may have gone to Europe, and I think you said that we don't know where it went, and that's fair. Let's find out. So I'm concerned, you bet. I'm not sure what your point is.
Yeah, my point is that you're not concerned at all. It's obvious how unconcerned you are.
I'm sorry, I'm not credible.
No, but see, I maybe made the mistake of taking you seriously.
Excuse me. I just said I'm concerned and we should investigate it.
You're obviously not concerned. If you were concerned,
what would you like
you
me
would
to
have
say?
known about this story a long time ago, as I did, as anyone who cares about this did. If you are really as worried about Russian interference as you have said repeatedly that you are, then why wouldn't you be on this with both feet, trying to determine who allowed this, why, and where the yellow cake?
Right. I'm sorry that you're upset that I'm agreeing with you that we should look into it. I don't know that we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. And in the week when we've had indictments and confessions of guilt relating to Russian influence and money laundering and the rest, and as you pointed out, the influence of foreign lobbying by governments on government officials, I'm not sure it's the only thing we should look at.
Okay.
But I'm agreeing with you.
Here's something that you could do like tonight. and that is demand that your colleagues make public their meetings with foreign lobbyists. There's no requirement to do that now. It's not clear why.
Yeah, I'll do you one better. I'd ban it. I don't think there should be any foreign lobbying by governments of members of Congress. It should be illegal. And people shouldn't get paid money by foreign governments to come and lobby members of Congress. I'd ban it, because that's what we have a State Department for. So if members of Congress want to talk to government officials, that's fine. They should. But we shouldn't have lobbyists getting paid for that. Let's ban it. Well, how about that?
Let me emphatically agree with you and ask a follow-up question, which is, now that we know that Russian-backed Ukrainian interests paid Paul Manafort a lot of money. He distributed it to a couple lobbying firms, one basically a Republican firm, the other the top Democratic firm in town, in Washington, to go up to the Hill and lobby members. We know that they met with the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Menendez of New Jersey. We can't get a straight answer from his office about how many meetings and with whom he had. Why can't we?
Well, you should ask Senator Menendez that. I don't do his schedule.
Have you met with any lobbyists representing foreign interests of any kind since you've been in Congress?
No.
Your colleagues have, and I wonder why I don't have a right to know who they met with and what they talked about.
Right, you should, and I'd ban it. So I think you and I agree about this.
No, but we don't fully agree. I mean, I agree with you in the banning, and God bless you. But because there's a story here about Russian interference in our government, things that have happened for years, and now that we know some of the details in this indictment, Paul Manafort's indictment,
right?
Why shouldn't we be able to get to the bottom of it? Congress has exempted itself from these reporting requirements.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Manafort indictment. That might bear some attention too. But the fact is that I am, for the third or fourth time, agreeing with you. I think not only should members disclose those foreign lobbying
Well, how can we get them to disclose as a member of the body?
I told you I would leapfrog you and ban it. So what I can do is I can introduce legislation.
Look, you know it's not going to get banned. Let's start the first step, which is, why don't you call upon the Democratic leader to demand that all Democrats under her leadership release a comprehensive list of the meetings they've had with foreign lobbyists.
Right. I'm sure you'd want the Republicans to do that.
100% I would.
Right. Well, it wasn't in your question.
There were Republicans involved. Hold on. There were Republicans involved in this. I'm not flacking for the Republicans.
No, somehow only Democrats made your question.
No, that's not. But you're a Democrat.
Correct.
And one with sway and influence.
And I'm one that is here agreeing with you. That seems to trouble you in some way, but I don't know how to do it any more emphatically.
Are you?
I agree with you. In fact, I believe I went beyond your position of disclosure to banning it outright.
No, you didn't actually, because it's one thing to ban it going forward. Would you sponsor legislation requiring sitting members of Congress to disclose all the meetings they've had with foreign lobbyists?
Yeah, sure, if it makes you happy. How about
if it's good for America?
How about, you bet, let's do it. How about we also talk about the indictments that got handed down this week involving the president's campaign manager and his foreign policy advisor? Can we do that too?
His foreign policy advisor.
I know we filled a week of airtime on this show.
Policy advisor, it's hilarious.
Well, that's how he described him to the Washington Post. So
yeah, that's true.
I got that from the president, who said that.
I think the Manafort thing, in case you're asking my opinion, is a serious thing. He was chairman of the president's campaign.
Right.
Totally fair.
He's under indictment.
Yeah, absolutely. The Papadopoulos
12 felonies.
You're not at gunpoint going to get me to take that seriously. That's ridiculous. This kid was in no sense a foreign policy advisor. They couldn't get real foreign policy advisors, so they hauled a 29-year-old who'd been in the model UN in there to pretend to be one. And now he turns out to be an idiot. That's bad judgment, I guess, putting him on the advisor list, but you can't convince me that's a real thing, because it's not.
Well, I'd be careful about that, because if you hang your hat on how senior he was, you might want to consider for just a moment that the same actions he was engaged in and lied about to federal agents is very similar to the actions that were engaged in by now under indictment Paul Manafort, Donald Trump Jr., and Jared Kushner.
I don't know about Kushner.
When they met with Russian lawyers for the same purpose, which was to access.
You're drawing a connection that's totally idiotic. I mean, there's no connection.
Excuse me. What is idiotic? It is not in dispute that the president's son and his son-in-law and Manafort, and we know about Manafort now, met with Russian lawyers who were there expressly to bring
let me repeat
dirt on Hillary Clinton, which is
glib and totally insincere line when I say, let's look into that. Let's look into that.
Well, you've been. It's funny. I'm glad to hear you say that, because for the better part of a year, you've been making fun of this investigation, and now we're taking it seriously.
Yeah, I think I'm taking the part that might affect American national security, including the Paul Manafort part.
That's good. And what we should do is we should let Bob Mueller do his work. Can you agree on that?
I totally agree.
Let me ask you another question.
I'm sorry, I'm being told I have to go. We've gone over, but I agree with you on that. Nice to see you.
It's good to be in agreement.
Hillary Clinton just got backstabbed by a top Democrat who admitted her party rigged the 2016 primary on Hillary's behalf. That's next. Wasn't that long ago. In fact, just last year, Donna Brazile was a dutiful soldier for the Democratic Party. In fact, she ran it. Now, a year after that party's election defeat, she is sticking a knife in Hillary Clinton. In a piece in Politico today, taken from her forthcoming book, Brazile describes how Clinton engineered a, quote, secret takeover of the Democratic National Committee. Brazile says Clinton's campaign was effectively funded by the DNC, even though it was supposed to preside neutrally, the DNC was, over the Democratic primary race. Tezlyn Figaro was a staffer for the Bernie campaign. She may have suspected something like this was going on. Now she knows for sure, and we couldn't resist getting her reaction to it. Tezlyn, great to see you. I remember months ago, a year ago, you said you believed something like this was afoot. How do you feel now that you know you were right?
Oh, you better believe what we said it a year ago, repeatedly over and over and over. And folks just like to pretend that we were asking them to believe in Santa Claus, as if we were just completely delusional, when we've said over and over that the system was rigged. And this is, again, it's important to remember, Tucker, that I actually worked on the national campaign, traveled all over the country for 7 years. I wasn't just sitting back on Twitter being a Twitter warrior or a Facebook bandit. These were things that we were actually seeing out in the field that we knew to be true. And so now that the chickens have finally come home to roost, like we're saying around here in Houston, it looks like she's earned history and did something that no other candidate has done through presidential elections. Not only did they give her the money, she gave the DNC the money to buy the cookies. She baked the cookies, bought the cookies, ate the cookies in the cookie jar, and it's pretty clear on who had control of the party. So me, Sanders supporters, and surrogates are all sitting around this evening saying, I told you so.
As a lifelong Democrat, how does it make you feel that your party, according to Donna Brazile, rigged a primary election?
I mean, it made me feel the same way that I did when I initially joined the campaign. Like you and I have talked before previously, I went to the independent side because I joined the Bernie Sanders campaign, not because I'm a socialist, because I'm not. I joined him because I wanted someone to speak up against the establishment. So it feels the same way that it did in 2008 and 2010 and 2012. And now this is just, we have the evidence to finally show what we've been talking about this entire time.
Kind of obvious, though, in retrospect. I mean, do you really think in a free and fair, open primary, of all the potential Democratic candidates, Hillary Clinton, who lost in 2008 in the same scenario, would have been chosen as the nominee?
I think that the way it was set up with Bernie Sanders not having the name recognition that he did, that did hurt him in some respects.
Right.
But to look at people who didn't even know who Bernie Sanders was to now be, according to some polls, one of the most popular politicians in America, a lot of more ground could have been made. But Tucker, we actually went, particularly in the South. I was a National Racial Justice Director, and we went to churches, we went to local communities that wouldn't even give us the time of day, not even an appointment to even share our platform. So I can't say what it would have been, whether he would have won the nomination or won the presidency. What I do know is that he did not receive a fair shot, just like the people who ran on the state level didn't receive a fair shot, that all the money was pulled to the Hillary Clinton campaign, in addition to the President Obama campaign. Donna Brazile was very clear. And we have to ask ourselves, why would Donna Brazile, a 30-year veteran in the game, turn on her establishment friends? I'm looking to see more that's going to come out of this scandal.
Well, she's coming on this show next week, and she'll tell us. I hope you'll be watching. Tezlyn Figaro, thanks a lot for coming on.
I will. Thank you.
Republicans in Congress have unveiled their plan to overhaul the U.S. tax code. It's complex. Thankfully, we have Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry here to explain it.
Tucker, it will be a big, beautiful tax cut. That's what we can report.
Okay.
The president has said.
All right.
In all seriousness, the details finally today. $1.5 trillion tax cut. They're going to shrink down 7 tax rates down to 3, 12%, 25%, 35%, and they'll keep the rich at 39.6%. But what's interesting is they're going to cut the corporate tax rate down from 35% to 20%. So Democrats are jumping on this by saying, look, out of the $1.5 trillion in tax cuts, $1 trillion is going to go to businesses. Now, you know the Republican philosophy, conservatives say, look, that is going to end up helping. They're going to create jobs. It's going to mean increased wages. Democrats are jumping on that and saying, no, it's unfair to the middle class. And they're going further by, you've heard this talking point on Twitter, on one cable show after another. It's a scam, and Democrats have been charging in recent weeks this is actually going to be a tax increase for the middle class. Today, the Washington Post obliterated that talking point. They did a fact check and gave it 4 Pinocchios. videos. And here's what they said in that article. They basically said, in their haste to condemn the GOP tax plan, Democrats have spread far and wide the false claim that families making less than $86,000 on average will face a hefty tax hike. Actually, it's the opposite. Most families in that income range would get a tax cut. In fact, we've run the numbers, about 97 million families will end up getting a tax cut. So that talking point saying that the middle class is getting a tax increase is completely false. That gives the president a boost. However, he has a very narrow margin in the House. Very few votes to spare to get this passed, and as you know, an even more of an uphill climb in the Senate, because think about, they couldn't repeal and replace Obamacare, right? So you're going to have people like Rand Paul and John McCain and others talking about the deficit, Bob Corker. So this is far from reality, but this talking point that it's going to hurt the middle class really took a blow today.
And it could change completely in the Senate. That's why we're speaking to Steve Mnuchin this weekend. Get to the bottom of it. Thank you, Ed.
Good to see you, buddy.
Appreciate it. Are tech companies censoring politically conservative views? They are, actually, and we'll talk to someone who's experienced it firsthand. Stay tuned.
Murray.
Well, a handful of tech companies increasingly dominate the daily lives of Americans. What could go wrong? Whether you're shopping, socializing, working, or learning, odds are you'll be spending an awful lot of time using Amazon, Facebook, Google, and a couple of others. Can we count on the goodwill of these companies? That's a rhetorical question. Dennis Prager operates Prager University, which creates videos online to educate people. He's recently sued Google and its subsidiary YouTube. He says they've deliberately restricted his videos so they have less reach and are ineligible for ad revenue. Dennis Prager joins us tonight. Dennis, that's a heavy-duty charge. And clearly, I don't think you would have filed a lawsuit without evidence to support it. Tell us what you know, why they did this to you.
They have placed on their restricted list. That means that it can't be viewed in libraries, in schools, or any home that filters out pornography, for example. Cannot be seen in any of those places. Our videos are as innocent as exists on the internet. 4 Pulitzer Prize winners, professors from Stanford, MIT, Harvard, Yale. I mean, it is about as normative and conservative, but we don't only have conservatives. Alan Dershowitz has given a number of videos, and by the way, his video was placed on the restricted list as well. When you understand which ones, for example, I gave a video, and I only give 15% of the 260 or so videos that are there, and they're all 5 minutes long. We have 500 million views this year, so it's rather large. This is a big deal, this suit. And I have a video, for example, on the 10 Commandments. So I have one 5-minute video per commandment. The one that I have on Thou shalt not murder. How's that? That has been placed on the restricted list. We have a video, America Must Lead. So do liberals have a video, America Must Lead, but our America Must Lead, and I believe it was given by Brett Stephens, not exactly a flaming conservative, even that was placed on the restricted list. It's all entirely due to our content and being conservative. And they need to be called on this.
Well, yeah, that's for sure. What you've said, and I believe you because I know you, and I know that you're a religious and moral man, and you're smart. So you bring this argument to them, to Google and its subsidiary YouTube, and you say, why are you doing this to me?
Right.
What was their response?
Inappropriate for children.
Well, but did they give examples?
There is no answer. No, that's it. They have a stock phrase, but we actually finally got it from a human, not from some automatic response. And they still said inappropriate, but we still don't understand why. We have a Victor Davis Hanson, whom I'm sure you know. He's a wonderful human being.
Yes.
He gives a 5-minute course on the history of the Korean War. That if America looks good, censored is probably an appropriate word. It's restricted. If Israel looks good, it's restricted. It's almost predictable what they would restrict. And the point is this, that they should say, look, we are liberal or left-wing organizations. We don't want to give a forum for others.
Yeah.
And then I have no issue. But they say that they are
they
a
have too
public
much power
forum
over our information.
And that's not honest.
Dennis, please tell us what happens with the suit. Thank you for that.
I will.
Up next, clash of the cable hosts. Bret Baier versus Shannon Bream. Final exam just around the corner. Time now for only Thursday, but already the highlight of the week. Time now for Final Exam, where we see which famous news personality has been paying attention to the news. Tonight we pit the forces of day against the forces of night. Shannon Bream hosts the brand new Fox News at Night at 11 p.m. Eastern. Bret Baier, of course, hosts Special Report every day at 6. They join us both in studio. The first time ever Shannon Bream has been described as a force of darkness.
That's not a title that's been used. I try to use my powers for good, not evil.
By the way, you're one of the rare people who does. Okay, so here are the rules. You put your hands on the buzzer. I'm going to ask questions. The first one to buzz in gets to answer the question. Each correct answer awards you 1 point. Each incorrect answer, like the SAT, detracts a point. Best of 5 wins.
And Shannon already has a W.
She does. She already does. I do want to psych you out. Can I just take the temperature of the room? You feeling good about this?
A little nervous.
I mean, listen, I know it's always because we don't know what's coming.
Don't be nervous. Everything depends on this.
All right.
Question 1. Forbes magazine just released its list of the world's most powerful women this year. Which 63-year-old former bartender takes top spot?
63-year-old former bartender.
Former bartender.
Most powerful?
Oh. Bret Baier, ladies and gentlemen.
Sheryl Sandberg.
Sheryl Sandberg. Is she 63,
She's not 63
and a former bartender? To the tape we go.
UK's Prime Minister Theresa May taking Clinton's spot as the world's second most powerful woman. German Chancellor Angela Merkel remaining number 1.
Sorry, Cheryl.
I was about to say, if she doesn't email you after this segment, I won't really be surprised.
Brett needs to lean way out.
There goes my Facebook.
Lean out.
There goes his Facebook. Okay, question 2. Question 2 is pretty good. On Sunday night, a former U.S. president threw out the first pitch of the World Series game in Houston, Texas. Who was it? Shannon Bream.
Bush 43.
Bush 43, as distinct from 41. To the tape we go.
43 taking the field in Houston, where he's greeted by his father, former President George H.W. Bush, who gave him the ball. Such an amazing sight, 2 presidents on the same diamond, and then President Bush winding up and throwing a strike, of course.
Have you tested these lights? I mean, has there been like a qualified...
My cat-like reflexes.
This game, it's fundamentally theological. It tells you whose side God is on.
Oh, sorry, guys.
The light.
The light. All right, question 3. A big-name NFL sponsor is blasting the National Football League over its handling of the anthem protest. The company's CEO says his sales are way down due to the league not punishing players who kneel. Which company is it? Bret Baier.
Papa John's.
Papa John's Pizza, says Bret Baier to the tape.
The NFL and its national anthem protest may have had a strange side effect. According to the Papa John's CEO, it's hurting pizza sales. And they say it's because nobody's watching football anymore.
Papa John's.
Listen,
I thought you might go Domino's.
Yeah. Sheryl Sandberg orders Papa John's.
She does.
The garlic dipping sauce. Have you had that with Papa John's? I mean, that's...
Remember who you're talking to. Yeah, I've had the garlic
good stuff.
dipping sauce. All right, question 4. On her current book tour, which has lasted over 11 years, Hillary Clinton was asked which Halloween costume she would be. What was her answer?
Oh.
Hillary Clinton ran for president fairly recently.
The book tour has been 11 years.
Selling a book. It's been 11 years long.
What was her Halloween costume, Shannon?
Which would it be?
Wait,
if she were to dress up on Halloween, what would she go as, Hillary Clinton? Bret Baier.
Wonder Woman?
Ooh.
Wonder Woman is Bret Baier's answer. What did Hillary say?
What are you going to do for Halloween? I will maybe come as the president. I think that's
Yes. With Hillary the sad answer is always the right answer.
Oh.
So you go to -1.
You do. Yeah,
tough.
you actually.
That's really tough.
See, we're back to
that's 0. Okay.
We're back to the theological underpinnings of this
Back to my
game.
strategizing. Like,
Exactly.
kill me. You don't.
Final question. Everything hangs on this. Don't feel pressure. The French, people in France this week, are in crisis mode. They're forced to cut back on their croissant intake. Turns out that country has a major shortage of which ingredient? Brett Baer.
To go to 0, flour.
Flour! Okay, just to sort of describe the stakes here, I think you're at -1.
That's true.
Right? You could be at -2, or you could be at 0. Everything hangs in this. Is the answer flour?
There's a shortage of butter in France. There's a headline for you. Supermarkets running out. Why? They can't pay for it. Poor weather, not enough cow feed. Did you know France is the #1 consumer of butter on this planet? 18 pounds of it consumed per person in France every year.
Cholesterol. It sounds so much more official when Stewart says it.
The deeper question, though, at 18 pounds per person per year, why are they so thin?
They walk everywhere.
Right. Atkins is real. I think that's
It is. It might be.
Shannon Breen,
Is that
for the
it?
second week in a row. That is. That is it. And you win again.
So who was
What
the
do I
first?
win?
Brian Kilmeade went
I took
down?
him down.
Yeah, Brian Kilmeade went down.
Yeah. Here's the thing, like the goose calling championship every year. You may know this. I don't know. You do it 3 times in a row, and you're out. You're eliminated. So I take down one
three
more
times
person.
in a row, then you were the all-time
I can't ever come back.
The moral champion for sure. Thank you both. That was awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's final exam. Pay attention to the news over the week as if you were a news anchor. You can play along for another edition next Thursday. We'll be right back. So just a minute ago, Twitter admitted that an employee today accidentally deleted the president's Twitter account. Accidentally. Oh, the page is back. And we will be too tomorrow night from the West Coast. Handing it over now to Sean Hannity. See you tomorrow.